My wife spent her life holding our family together, yet on the day we laid her to rest, our son wasn't there. He chose to celebrate his wife's birthday instead of honoring his mother's final goodbye. Days later, he stood at my door with a demand that left me speechless. This story isn't just about loss, it's about betrayal, greed, and a father's decision that changed everything. What happened next shook our entire family to its core. The church was filled with silence, broken only by the sound of muffled sobs and the slow shuffle of mourners finding their seats. The air carried the heavy scent of lily, a kind my wife had always loved, though she never imagined they'd surround her like this. As I sat in the front pew, staring at her framed photo resting against the casket, a hollow ache swallowed me whole. The woman who had held our family together, who had given everything of herself, was gone. I should have drawn strength from the crowd that had come to honor her friends, neighbors, distant relatives, but all I felt was the sting of an absence that cut deeper than death itself. The space beside me, where my son should have been, remained painfully empty. Every time the doors creaked open, my heart leapt, praying it would be him, finally realizing the weight of this moment. But each time it wasn't. He never came. Whispers began to ripple through the room, subtle at first, then louder as the truth spread like wildfire. He's not here. His own mother's funeral. Can you believe it? I bowed my head lower, unable to escape their pitying glances. Shame burned inside me, not for myself, but for him, for the boy I had raised. Man I thought he had become. When the priest's voice rose in solemn prayer, I clutched the edges of the pew, trying to hold myself together. I wanted to believe there was some mistake, some reason he hadn't walked through those doors. But deep down, I already knew the truth. My son had made a choice that left me burying my wife alone, and in that moment, grief was no longer the only weight I carried. Betrayal sat heavy on my chest, pressing harder than sorrow ever could. The morning after the funeral, my phone buzzed with a message. For a brief moment, I hoped it was an apology, some acknowledgement of the pain his absence had caused. But when I opened it, the word struck harder than silence ever could. Dad, I couldn't make it yesterday. It was Anna's birthday. I couldn't just leave her. Hope you understand. Understand? My wife had taken her final breath, her body lowered into the ground, and my son had chosen cake, candles, and laughter over her last goodbye. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, the message still glowing on the screen like a cruel reminder. Neighbors and relatives called throughout the day, offering condolences, their voices heavy with sympathy. But I heard the same question woven through each one. Where was your son? Each time I deflected, made excuses, tried to protect him even as my heart cracked wider. Yet when I was alone again, the truth was undeniable. He had chosen his wife's birthday over his mother's funeral. The bitterness seeped deeper than grief. I thought of all the nights my wife had stayed awake, waiting for him to come home safe. The meals she'd skipped so he could have enough. The prayers she whispered over him when he was too young to understand. And yet, when her life ended, he wasn't there. I sat in the empty living room, her photo clutched in my hands, and whispered, "He didn't come, Maria. He didn't even try." My voice cracked, tears finally spilling down my face. In that moment, sorrow gave way to something darker, a wound not carved by loss, but by choice. As I sat in the quiet of the house, memories of Maria flooded my mind, not the big moments, but the quiet sacrifices no one else seemed to notice. She was the kind of mother who gave without keeping score, who always placed our son's happiness above her own. And now, those memories felt like knives twisting deeper. I remembered the winter when money was tight, when we barely had enough for heating. She sold her jewelry, the necklace her grandmother had left her, so our boy could have a proper coat and boots. She smiled through it, saying she didn't need ornaments as long as he was warm. He never knew. Then there were the endless nights she stayed awake, sitting by the window until he came home from school events, eights, or parties. She'd keep the porch light burning, no matter how late it was, her heart unwilling to rest until she knew he was safe. She prayed over him when he was sick, whispered encouragements before his exams, and defended him fiercely when others doubted him. Even when he made mistakes, when he disappointed us, she was the one who found reasons to forgive, who reminded me he was still our boy, deserving of love. Maria never gave up on him, not once. And yet, when her time came, when she needed nothing more than his presence, his hand on her casket, his farewell, he wasn't there. He chose someone else's celebration over honoring the woman who had given him everything. The unfairness of it all burned inside me. My wife had poured her soul into him, and in return, he couldn't spare a single day. That truth haunted me more than the silence of this house ever could. 2 days after the funeral, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I picked up the phone and called my son. My hands trembled as I waited for him to answer, the anger and grief boiling together inside me. When his voice finally came through, casual and light, it nearly broke me. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" "Everything okay?" My wife was in the ground, and he had danced the night away. My voice came out low, rougher than I intended. "No, everything is not okay. Where were you?" "At your mother's funeral?" There was a pause, the kind that tells you the other person isn't searching for words, they're searching for an excuse. "Dad, I told you. It was Anna's birthday. I couldn't just leave her. You know how important it is to her." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "Important? Your mother gave her life to you. She carried you, raised you, sacrificed. Everything for you. And on the day we laid her to rest, you thought a birthday party mattered more?" His tone shifted, defensive, sharp. "You don't understand. My wife would never forgive me if I abandoned her on her birthday. I had to keep the peace. It doesn't mean I didn't care about Mom." The words stung like acid. "Peace? You chose peace with her over respect for the woman who gave you everything. Do you have any idea what it felt like to bury your mother without her son standing beside her casket?" He sighed, impatient now. "Dad, you're overreacting. Mom's gone. Nothing would have changed that. At least Anna still has me here." My heart cracked wide open. Overreacting, as though a mother's final goodbye was nothing but an optional appointment. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. When I finally found my voice, it came out as a whisper. "You broke her heart, even in death, and you broke mine too." Then I ended the call, my chest heaving, my grief heavier than ever. The house felt like a stranger to me after the funeral. It was the same walls, the same furniture, the same curtains Maria had chosen years ago, but without her, it all seemed lifeless. Every corner carried her imprint, her favorite chair by the window, the half-finished knitting on the side table, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. And yet, it was all hollow now. I sat in the living room long after the sun had gone down, the silence pressing in like a weight. For years, this house had been filled with her voice, her laughter, her gentle humming while she cooked. Now, the only sound was the old clock ticking on the wall, each second dragging me further into a future I didn't want. I picked up her photo from the mantel, running my thumb across her smiling face. The tears came quietly, no longer in bursts, but in steady rivers that wouldn't stop. I thought of how she used to light up when our son came home, how she bragged about him to neighbors, even when he gave her little reason to. She had carried so much pride for him, never letting his flaws overshadow her love. And in return, He couldn't even give her a final goodbye. The bitterness twisted inside me, but so did regret. Had I done enough to teach him loyalty? Had I been blind to the signs that he had grown into a man who valued convenience over love? The questions gnawed at me, offering no answers. Alone in that dark, empty house, grief wasn't the only thing I wrestled with. It was the crushing reality that the family Maria and I had built was unraveling. One choice at a time got asterisk. The silence of the house was broken by a sudden knock. At first, I thought it was a neighbor bringing food, as so many had done since the funeral. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a casserole or a kind face. It was my son, standing there as if nothing had happened. He wore his usual confident smile, the kind that once made me proud, but now felt like a mask. "Hey, Dad," he said lightly, almost casually, as though we hadn't just buried his mother without him. I stepped aside, letting him in, though my chest tightened with anger. The moment he crossed the threshold, the house felt heavier, the air denser. He glanced around, his eyes brushing over the photos of Maria still on the walls, her presence lingering in every frame. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker across his face, but it was gone before I could be sure. "I figured we should talk," he said, settling into the chair his mother had loved most. My stomach twisted at the sight of him there, sitting in her place without hesitation. I waited, hoping for an apology, some acknowledgement of the wound he'd left. But it never came. Instead, he leaned back, clasped his hands, and smiled faintly. "It's been a tough week, I know. But now that things are settled, we should discuss what comes next." The words hit me like a cold slap. What comes next? I had buried my wife days ago, and already he was talking about the future, not with grief, not with love, but with expectation. In that moment, I realized the knock on my door hadn't brought comfort or remorse. It had brought something else entirely, a demand waiting to be spoken. Asterisk for a moment, we sat in silence. I studied him, waiting, hoping for words of remorse, for the apology his mother deserved. But when he finally spoke, it wasn't regret that filled the air. It was greed. "Dad," he began carefully, his voice carrying the smoothness of someone rehearsed, "I know things have been difficult, but we need to be practical now. Mom's gone, and there are financial matters to settle. It's only fair that we talk about the inheritance." I blinked at him, my hands tightening on the arm of my chair. Inheritance? The word tasted bitter. "Yes," he said quickly, leaning forward as if sensing my hesitation. "You know, the house, the savings, anything Mom left behind. I mean, I'm your son. It's my right, isn't it? Anna and I have bigger plans for our future. This could really set us up." The audacity of his tone struck harder than his absence at the funeral. His mother had been gone less than a week, and already he was circling like a vulture. My heart pounded, anger rising with every word. "You're right?" I asked, my voice low. "You think you're entitled to her life's sacrifices when you couldn't even stand by her coffin?" He shifted uncomfortably, but pressed on. "Dad, don't make this emotional. Mom would have wanted me to be taken care of. You know how much she loved me. She wouldn't want me struggling while you hold on to everything." I slammed my hand against the table, the sound echoing through the hollow house. "She didn't give her life so you could demand pieces of it like prizes. She gave her life so you could grow into a man with honor, something you've forgotten." For the first time, his smile faltered. But instead of backing down, his jaw tightened. "You'll see I'm right. It's only fair, Dad. You can't keep it all to yourself." Fair. That word twisted in my chest. There was nothing fair about burying the woman who had loved him more than life itself, while he celebrated somewhere else. Asterisk the air between us thickened, heavy with words we hadn't yet said. I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on him. Do you even hear yourself? Days ago, we lowered your mother into the ground, and you stand here demanding her savings as if she were nothing more than a bank account. He shifted in his chair, his face tightening. Dad, don't twist this. I loved Mom, but life has to move forward. Anna and I are starting a family. We need a bigger place, better stability. Isn't that what she would have wanted for me? To be secure? My chest burned. Secure? She wanted you to be present, to honor her, to carry her memory with respect. And yet, when it mattered most, you chose a party over her funeral. You let her down in life and in death. His voice sharpened, frustration spilling through. You think it's that simple? You've always judged me. Nothing I do is enough for you. Maybe this is your chance to actually support me without criticizing me for once. I rose from my chair, my fists clenched. Support you? I've supported you your entire life. Your mother and I gave everything, our money, our time, our strength, to make sure you had more than we ever did. And how do you repay that? By abandoning her on the day she needed you most, and then knocking on my door to collect what's left of her. He stood too now, his jaw set. You're being dramatic. It's just money, Dad. You can't take it with you. Why let it rot when it could help me build something? I stared at him, my voice low but sharp. It's not about the money. It's about what it represents. And right now, it represents everything you failed to be. The room quaked with silence after those words, both of us breathing heavily, neither willing to back down. Asterisk, the argument had grown so loud that neither of us noticed the front door creak open. It wasn't until a familiar voice cut through the tension that we both turned. Enough. It was my daughter, standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. She had always been quieter than her brother, the one who kept peace rather than stoked fires. But now, her voice carried a sharpness I had never heard before. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on her brother. Do you even hear yourself? Mom hasn't even been gone a week, and you're already circling like a vulture. You didn't come to her funeral. You didn't hold Dad's hand when he needed you most. And now you have the nerve to demand money? His face flushed. You don't understand. This is about fairness. No, she snapped, cutting him off. This is about loyalty, about respect. Mom gave you everything, and you couldn't even give her a final goodbye. That's not fairness. That's betrayal. Her words hung heavy, each one a blow he couldn't deflect. For a moment, he looked as if he might argue again, but his shoulders sagged under the weight of her truth. She turned to me then, her expression softening. Dad, you don't owe him anything. Mom wouldn't want her sacrifices twisted into demands. She'd want you to honor her memory, not feed his greed. In that moment, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since the funeral strength. I wasn't standing alone anymore. My daughter had seen the truth, and she was unafraid to speak it. Asterisk, as my daughter's words echoed through the room. Silence fell again. My son shifted uneasily, his jaw clenched, his pride wounded. But in that silence, my mind drifted backward to moments I had long buried. I remembered his teenage years, the slammed doors, the constant complaints that we didn't give him enough, even when we sacrificed so much to make his life easier. His mother would defend him, whispering, "He's just young. He'll grow out of it." I believed her. I wanted to believe her, but the signs never disappeared. When he got his first job, he bragged about the paycheck, yet never once thought to help with bills, even when we struggled. At holidays, while his sister brought thoughtful little gifts, he would show up empty-handed, insisting he forgot or that he was too busy. We laughed it off then, but inside, I knew. And then came the wedding. His mother poured herself into it, stitching decorations by hand, staying up late to make sure every detail was perfect. And yet, when it came time to acknowledge her efforts, he gave all the credit to his wife. I saw the hurt in her eyes, though she never said a word. Now, standing in this room, facing his demand for money, it struck me like a cold truth. This wasn't new. This wasn't a sudden shift. It had been building for years, piece by piece, choice by choice. And maybe, I thought bitterly, I had ignored it for too long. I looked at him, not the boy I raised, but the man he had become. And for the first time, I wondered if I had been blind to who he truly was all along. The air in the room felt heavy, as though every breath carried the weight of years unspoken. My son's fists clenched at his sides, and I could see the storm gathering in his eyes. Finally, it broke. You think I'm selfish? You think I don't care? His voice rose, echoing against the walls. Do you have any idea how hard my life has been? You always favored her. He jabbed a finger toward his sister, while I had to fight for every scrap of attention. Don't stand there acting like you're some perfect father. The accusation hit me harder than I expected. His sister gasped, stepping forward, but he wasn't finished. You want to talk about loyalty? Where was yours when I needed support? You never believed in me. You doubted me every step of the way. And Mom, his voice cracked for the first time, though anger quickly masked it. She was the only one who ever understood me. Now she's gone, and all I have left is what's rightfully mine. My daughter shook her head in disbelief. Rightfully yours? Mom gave her life for this family, for all of us. You don't get to twist that into some excuse for greed. He turned on her, eyes blazing. Easy for you to say. You've always been the golden child. You never had to. Prove yourself. Everything was handed to you while I was left in the shadows. His words stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed a wound he had carried for years, a wound he never let us heal. And instead of mending it with love, he had built it into a wall of resentment, brick by brick, until all that was left was bitterness. That I realized, then this was not just about money. It was about decades of jealousy, about a son who had chosen to see neglect where there was only imperfect love. And in his bitterness, he had convinced himself that betrayal was justice. For a long moment, I didn't move. His words still rang in my ears sharp, bitter, twisted by years of resentment. My daughter stood tense beside me, waiting for me to answer. And my son, my own flesh and blood, glared at me like I was the enemy. I drew in a slow breath. My voice, when it came, was steady. You talk about what's rightfully yours, I said, my eyes fixed on his. But you forget something. Your mother and I built this life with our hands, our sacrifices, and our love. Nothing was ever promised to you. Nothing is owed. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop him. All those years, your mother defended you. She said you just needed time. She believed you would grow into a man who honored family. And God knows, I wanted to believe it too. But look at you now standing in this house, not with grief in your heart, not with love for the mother who gave you everything, but with a demand on your lips. Money, that's all you came for. His eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something behind his anger uncertainty. I stepped closer. You blame me, you blame your sister, you even twist your mother's memory to justify your choices. But the truth is, son, no one abandoned you. You abandoned yourself. You chose pride over humility, greed over gratitude, and resentment over love. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. I straightened my shoulders. You will not take from this family what you haven't earned. If you came here expecting me to hand over your mother's legacy, you came to the wrong place. Because I will not dishonor her memory by feeding your greed. The silence that followed was heavy, final. A line had been drawn, and for the first time, I felt the weight of a father's choice to stand firm, even when it meant standing against his own son. Asterisk for a heartbeat. The room was utterly silent. My words hung heavy in the air, echoing in the walls of the house that once held laughter and warmth. Then, like a storm breaking, my son's face twisted in fury. His voice rose, sharp and cutting, filled with a rage that had been simmering for years. "So that's it," he shouted, stepping forward. "After everything I've done, after being pushed aside my whole life, you're just going to shut me out? You think you can just write me off, pretend I'm not your son, and keep everything for yourself and her?" He jabbed a finger at his sister. His glare burning with bitterness. My daughter stiffened, but I gently placed a hand on her shoulder, keeping her calm. "You always favored her," he spat. "Always. She could do no wrong, and I could never do right. Now you're proving it. You'll leave her everything, won't you? You'll erase me like I never existed." "Well, I won't let that happen." He paced the room, his words tumbling faster, angrier. "You don't understand, do you? I need this. My wife, she expects me to provide. Her family expects it too. Do you know what it feels like to be treated like a failure in your own home? Do you know what it's like to be compared to her father, who can buy anything and everything while I have nothing? You don't. You never cared." His voice cracked. Then, and for a moment, the anger gave way to desperation. His hands trembled as he pointed toward me. "If you don't give me what's mine, don't expect me to ever come back. Don't expect me to stand by you when you're old. Don't expect my children to know your name. You'll lose me forever. Do you hear me? Forever." The weight of his words settled over us like a dark cloud. My daughter gasped softly, tears streaming down her cheeks, but I stood there, my heart heavy, realizing that this ultimatum wasn't born today. It had been growing for years, rooted in pride and resentment. And now he was forcing me to make the hardest choice a father could ever face. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. My son's words cut through me like shards of glass, but I did not flinch. I had spent a lifetime holding back my voice, avoiding conflict to keep the peace. But in that moment, I knew silence was no longer an option. I drew a deep breath and steadied myself. My daughter clutched my arm, trembling, while my son stood across the room, his chest heaving, his eyes glinting with a dangerous mixture of anger and desperation. "You speak of being forgotten," I began slowly, my tone calm but firm. "You speak of being erased. But tell me, what choice did you make when your mother lay in her coffin? When the woman who gave you life was lowered into the ground and you chose to celebrate instead? That was the day you began to erase yourself from this family." My son's lips parted, but no words came out. His fists clenched at his sides. "You talk about respect," I continued, my voice rising with conviction. "But respect is not demanded, it is earned. And what have you given me? Anger, entitlement, excuses. You stand here today not as a son mourning the absence of his mother, not as a man seeking forgiveness, but as someone demanding payment like love is a debt. Oh, you." My daughter buried her face in her hands, her sobs filling the space my son left silent. "I will not be manipulated," I declared, my eyes locked on his. "This house, this legacy, will not be decided by threats. I will not place it in the hands of someone who has abandoned compassion for greed. If you walk out of this door tonight, know this: you are walking away by your own choice, not mine." His face went pale. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, his jaw trembling. For the first time that night, his fury faltered. "I am your father," I finished, my voice breaking slightly. "But I will not be your servant. And if that costs me a son, then so be it. At least I will know I stood for what was right." The room fell silent once more, but this silence felt different. It was the kind that came after a storm, heavy with the weight of a choice that could never be undone. The weight of my words lingered in the air long after I spoke them. My son stood frozen, his expression shifting between disbelief and wounded pride. For years, he had relied on my silence, mistaking it for weakness. But tonight, he faced the truth my silence had ended, and with it, his control. Slowly, he turned away, muttering something under his breath. His wife tugged at his sleeve, urging him toward the door. He hesitated only for a moment before storming out, the sound of the door slamming behind him echoing through the house. Like a final verdict, my daughter rushed to me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You did the right thing, Dad," she whispered, gripping my hands tightly. "Mom would have been proud of you." Her words pierced through the sorrow and steadied my trembling heart. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace settle over me. The days that followed were quiet, almost unnaturally so. My son didn't call, didn't visit, and made no effort to mend what had been broken. Yet in that silence, I found clarity. I realized that love cannot survive where respect is absent, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. Weeks later, I visited my wife's grave. I knelt by the headstone, brushing away leaves as the wind whispered through the trees. "I spoke for us," I told her softly. "I finally said what needed to be said. I hope you can rest knowing I stood strong." As I sat there, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the grief, the betrayal, the demands. Painful as it was, it had revealed something vital. Family is not defined by blood alone, but by loyalty, compassion, and honor. When I left the cemetery, I felt lighter, as though my wife herself had placed her hand on my shoulder. I knew the path ahead would not be easy. Perhaps my son would return someday, perhaps he would not. But I could no longer allow myself to live under the shadow of guilt or fear. I had spoken my truth. I had defended my wife's memory. And in doing so, I found the strength to reclaim my dignity. Because in the end, it was never about inheritance, or demands, or ultimatums. It was about love. And love, real love, demands respect. Without it, there is nothing.